All right, so let's get right into this. Come on over here for a moment. You need to understand when it comes to PTSD that a lot of people suffer from it, but in particular, veterans deal with it in a big way. And the VA tends not to be very gratuitous with the percentage that they give as to severity for essentially the benefits for the money that a veteran could receive. And then on the same side, you have the Social Security Administration, which when it comes to Social Security listing 12.15, they tend to be a little rough when actually giving a 12.15 PTSD listing level allowance. So there was a document, and the whole reason I'm doing this video is because somebody asked me, he said, okay, how do I learn about PTSD and what the SSA is looking at? I was like, well, you're looking for an admin document that was not originally released to the public. It was later released by groups, but originally it was a secret document created to outline essentially for internal purposes what SSA personnel should be looking for related to PTSD claims. Now, I'm just going to tell you right off the bat how to search it because I think it is important. It is directly from the SSA website, instruction notation AM-17049. Again, AM-17049. This is an administrative document, basically a policy reminder for evaluating post-traumatic stress disorder, which is what this video is about. Now, I'm not going to go through the basics, such as the background and the cutesy stuff. What I am going to go through, we're not going to go through the cutesy stuff. We're going to get right to the heart of the matter as to what they look for when it comes to PTSD. Let's go through it real quick. There are 4 main categories that they look for when it comes to evidence related to PTSD. And these are also applicable to the VA world when you're seeking your compensation in your permanent total or your TDIU as well. Princess Diana, woo! Thank you for the $2 donation. Let me give a little heart right there. Walter, how are you? I'm good. I'm doing okay. A little bit tired, but doing all right. Let's get right into this pupperoo. Number 1, intrusion. Intrusive symptoms involve memories of the event that repeatedly and uncontrollably invade one's thoughts. For example, nightmares and dissociative reactions in which the individual acts as if the traumatic events were occurring. So intrusion of thoughts, intrusions of nightmares, intrusions of night terrors, okay? Avoidance is category 2. Avoidance. This cluster involves persistence, avoidance of stimuli associated with the traumatic events. For example, avoidance of or efforts to avoid people or places associated with the event or distressing memories, thoughts, or feelings about the traumatic events. So the first category was intrusion. Something's coming into your brain and you're having a tough time dealing with it. Avoidance. You avoid places, people, and things, trains, planes, and automobiles. You avoid certain things that potentially could cause you to have an intrusion. Category 3, changes in mood and cognition. Changes in mood and cognition. Negative alterations in mood and cognition associated with the traumatic events beginning or worsening after the traumatic events occurred. For example, feelings of detachment or estrangement from others, or an inability to remember a key part of the traumatic event. So if you're ever around somebody who's been through war and all of a sudden they feel like they're not connecting with you, they don't have that connection, they feel like they're distancing themselves from you, that's, sometimes because they have devalued life. Sometimes they've devalued their own sense of being. Sometimes they've devalued the relationship because they feel like they're going to lose somebody at some point and they just don't want to have a connection. So that is the changes in mood and cognition, where basically somebody could be really happy and then really sad. Somebody could detach from you. They could be having, basically types of things where their mood is really, really relaxed and then really, really hyper, all kinds of stuff. Category 4 is an interesting one. Category 4 is arousal and hyperactivity. Marked alterations, marked means severe, marked alterations in arousal and reactivity associated with the traumatic events beginning or worsening after the traumatic events occurred. For example, sleep disturbance, you wake up, or being very watchful of one's surroundings, hypervigilance, aka you never put your back to the door, stuff like that. So that's more of your hyperreactivity to the situations around you because you are fearful, you are, afraid that something might come get you or might be problematic towards you. Obviously a lot of people in war, they have to do things that are required in war. They're always wondering about whose friends are going to show up and stuff like that. So there's those 4 categories. There's intrusion, avoidance, changes in mood and cognition, arousal, and hyperreactivity. Those are the 4 categories that define a win for essentially Social Security benefits with PTSD. Now, These four system clusters are similar to the medical criteria in paragraph A of listing 12.15 and 112.15, which is the child-based listing. The purpose of paragraph A criteria is to ensure that the mental disorder we are evaluating under the listings is significant enough to consider at step 3 of the sequential evaluation process. In other words, you got to be really, 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 really severe for them to even consider you for PTSD. Now, with that said, paragraph A criteria acts as an initial gatekeeper that screens impairments that may result in listing level functional limitations. We do not use the SSA, they do not use paragraph A criteria to establish the mental disorder MDI, which is medically determinable impairment, as part of our step 2 analysis. The paragraph A criteria are a much higher severity threshold than establishing a medically determinable impairment. Now, medically determinable impairment is just an impairment that they study to see, like, hey, could we use this to say that this person is struggling from this impairment and might not be able to work as a result, or might be limited in their ability to work as a result? Whereas step 3, element 3 level analysis is, how severe is this impairment? Is it truly severe? Cool. These 4 symptoms. Okay, so we've gone through those. According to the DSM-5, PTSD has high rates of co-occurrence, right? Happens over and over. Comorbidity with other mental disorders, okay? Common comorbid diagnosis in adults and older children include depression, bipolar, anxiety, and substance use disorders. And we all know a VA person that's been through that stuff. In young children, the most common comorbid diagnoses are oppositional defiance. They're like getting into fights and screw you, I'm not doing that. I don't want to do my homework. So oppositional defiance disorder and separation anxiety disorder. Somebody leaves, they're freaking out, they want them to come back, okay? When documenting and evaluating claims involving PTSD, it is important to remember some of the basic following details. Let's go through them real quick. The claimant is not required to submit original documentation proving the traumatic event occurred. For example, official documentation of assault or confirmation by law enforcement that the claimant witnessed a school shooting, perhaps. There must be evidence indicating that the person has reported the traumatic event to a social worker, counselor, or other healthcare provider at some point. So they're not required to have evidence of the original event, but they have to have talked to medical providers thereafter about it. Since the traumatic event is unique to the person experiencing it, an adjudicator should not discount an allegation of PTSD because of his or her personal belief that the event was insufficient consequence to cause PTSD. Because sometimes somebody will be scared, right? Somebody will walk in and scare them and they'll claim PTSD. And we're like, what the hell? There's no PTSD there. There's not enough to scare you. Some people, they get messed up from that. Like some people just get scared from like a 4th of July event. And then for the rest of their life, they get problems. The event itself is not the disabling factor, but rather how the person experiences, perceives, and deals with it thereafter. Determination of disability focuses on the medical evidence that reflects how the claimant has responded to the event and how he or she now functions because of it. PTSD may result from experiencing one traumatic event, but also from experiencing or witnessing multiple traumatic events, okay? And adjudicators must consider, so the people ruling on these claims, judging these claims, must consider whether the claimant's PTSD has lasted or is expected to last for a continuous period of at least 12 months. The duration requirements for all claimants under Title II and Title 16 begins at the time that a person is continuously unable to engage in substantial gainful activity. In other words, be able to continuously work a full-time job because of an MDI, medically determinable impairment. All right, so now here's the trick. Some of you don't talk about your PTSD with your providers. I don't know why, but it's just, you hold it back. Now look, I'm going to say something. I'm going to get in trouble for saying it, but I'm going to say it. When you go to your therapist, your behavioralist, your psychologist, okay, they know that they will be replaced. You'll go, I don't like that psychologist. They know that they'll be replaced if they ask you direct-oriented questions related to your PTSD. So as a result of that, culturally in the marketplace of people who are supposed to work on and help people with PTSD, it never happens. They never get to the core of the problem. They never talk about it. They never deal with it. And the reason why is because when you start bringing up PTSD stuff, the person goes, I don't want to talk about it. Or they start crying and yada, yada. And the reality is that then they go, I don't like that psychologist. I don't like that therapist. And then they get replaced. You can be that person where you just replace your psychologist and end up with one that basically doesn't do anything, that just asks you questions. You sit down, you feel somewhat okay at the end of it. They just ask you questions and you're good to go. But don't be that person. If you're a veteran with PTSD, if you are a civilian with PTSD, bring up the memory, bring up the details, bring up why, who, when, what happened. Go into detail. And the reason why is because at the end of the day, this is incredibly important. At the end of the day, if you want to feel some sort of peace, you're going to have to go over that bridge. If you don't go over that bridge, you ain't never going to feel that peace. So I'm just putting that out there. I know some people, oh, I can't talk about that. You can. You can. You just need a path to get to the deep parts of it. And a lot of these therapists won't do it because they'll go, oh, you'll complain about them. You'll talk to their boss. You'll beat them up. I don't want to, and then all of a sudden, oh, I'm going to leave them a negative this. Talk to them. You are there to speak with them. Some of you are paying to speak with them. All right. Evaluating claims involving no treatment history, sporadic treatment history, or with possible evidentiary inconsistencies. Let's talk about this real quick. When documenting and evaluating claims involving PTSD, it is important to remember the following. Some claimants may have experienced a traumatic event and may allege symptoms commonly associated with PTSD, but may not have sought treatment for PTSD or another mental disorder. They may not have all the medical evidence needed to evaluate the case. In that situation, you got to send them to a consultative examination, the SSA doctor. We do not discount a claimant's allegations because the traumatic event did not occur recently. People with PTSD may be uncomfortable discussing the traumatic events and resulting symptoms and may delay reporting these symptoms to healthcare providers. This is especially true in cases involving sexual violence, domestic abuse, and child abuse. We do not discount the symptoms a claimant reports because of the length of time between the traumatic event and the time the symptoms appeared, as medical research supports that people can exhibit a delayed expression of symptoms. While symptoms usually begin within the first 3 months after the trauma, some people may not express a full range of symptoms until many months or even years after the traumatic event. The DSM-5 classifies PTSD with delayed expression if the full diagnostic criteria are not met until at least 6 months after the event, although the onset and expression of some symptoms may be immediate. The medical record may not document the traumatic event consistently across the record for each or of each provider. The inconsistency is common given that people with PTSD may not report the traumatic event to every provider, or each provider may not provide an identical account of the claimant's statements. Because remember, sometimes they write stuff down and they get it right. Sometimes they write it down and they get it wrong. Okay. The medical record may not document the same symptoms consistently across the record of each provider. The fact that a claimant discloses symptoms of PTSD to one provider and not to another does not necessarily reflect an inconsistency with the claimant's self-report. The medical record may not document specifics regarding the frequency of symptoms, for example, daily intrusive thoughts since the last visit. Instead, the records may simply state patient has intrusive thoughts. The claimant or non-medical source who knows the claimant well is the best source of information in this instance. Okay. If any of the evidence in the record is inconsistent, we will consider the relevant evidence and see if we can determine whether the claimant is disabled based on the evidence we have. We will resolve the inconsistency when it's material to the disability determination, as we do with all the medical evidence. And after making every reasonable effort to obtain needed evidence from the claimant's medical sources and prior to ordering a CE, it is important that we carefully consider which source can best provide the needed evidence. For instance, if we need additional evidence, functional information, recontacting the claimant's own medical source or non-medical source may be most productive. If a CE is necessary, remember that the claimant's own medical source is generally the preferred CE provider. Selecting a qualified medical source to perform a consultative examination. This policy is expressly important in claims involving trauma or stress-related disorders. What they're saying here is they have to choose a doctor that has direct and specific knowledge of PTSD. All right, now we're going to be going over in another video the adjudicative value of information from non-medical sources, as such as a family member and a friend, because you need to know specifically what types of evidence will not just come from the doctors, but also outside of the medical field to help you win PTSD. All right, with this said, we've gone over the main functions of the types of impairments that you would normally see with PTSD, the things to keep in mind. Attorney Walter Hnot, I hope you enjoyed this really quick, short video. Please remember to like. Please remember to subscribe. Please remember to head over to Google and type in Disability Resolution Law Firm or Disability Resolution Florida and throw some stars up there if you like. Totally up to you. I will catch you all probably tomorrow, and we will have an amazing, amazing weekend. Please remember to be kind to each other. Mondays and Thursdays I go live. If you need a private session, 250 contract is below. I'll catch you a little bit later. You have a wonderful day, and we will go from there. Attorney Walter Hnot, and thank you so much. Have fun, and we'll catch up tomorrow. Thanks so much. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Oh, and there's the button. Perfect.